Hi, Stephanie. Thank you so much for coming to chat with me on the Inspired Mindset podcast. I'm so excited to hear more about your journey. And I'm just so appreciative for you to come on here and chat with me.
Oh, Katrina, I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. So let's kind of dive into it. I would love to hear about your journey and your transformation story. I know you have a lot to share with our listeners, and I can't wait to hear about it.
Yeah, I am a working mom. I do have my business, but I have a day job as well that I'm balancing. And I think one of my biggest struggles that I came to, with being a working mom and just figuring out your new priorities is that I had an opportunity that we were going to reorganize our team a little bit, our responsibilities were going to be shifted around. And so I had a moment to kind of say what I wanted to do. And luckily I'd already been doing a lot of personal growth work. So I had a foundation to kind of be introspective about that. And so what I did is I really wanted a job that was more easeful for me, because I know as working moms, we have a lot of stuff going on. And when a pain point starts to happen, it can get really painful quickly. So I was really kind of excited to have this opportunity to make some shifts, because I certainly wasn't in a position to just quit my job, without, different financial implications. So I really did want to find a way to make it work for me, even though that was not the reason why they were looking to, realign our responsibilities. But it was just nice to have a little bit of say. And I think even if you don't have the opportunity where this comes up so clearly, you can still do it. But I went through and tried to name the things I really liked about my job and what I would like to see more of in my life, and what I could, what I didn't like about my job. And then being able to go through and say hey, I love all of these things, so I'm going to fill my plate up with these things now. And then it was easier to say well, I don't have as much room on my plate anymore, the work plate, to do some things I didn't love anymore, without having to say hey, as a mom of 2 young kids and a husband who travels and sometimes has childcare issues, I can't sign up for these late nights, to do bid documents and stuff. But what I could say is I'm really great at these things, and I'm going to fill my plate up here. So yeah, it might be a good idea if those responsibilities could be offloaded. So that was a good way of using personal growth to know what I could and couldn't do, and use it to solve a pain point in my life. And it was really helpful and made things a lot easier for me and my family.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love how you were able to see this as an opportunity to really get what you wanted out of your position and get it out there, because not everyone, one, would see that in that opportunity. And so I'm curious to hear, when you found out that they were going to be doing some reorganization in the company and shifting things, how are you able to then take that and say, okay, I'm going to now use this to say what it is that I want to do and advocate for myself? Because you really saw that as an opportunity that maybe some people in a similar situation might have just sat on the sidelines and not participated in the way that you did.
Yeah, luckily I worked with a great team, and we were encouraged to come up with the plan. If we're going to separate duties a little bit differently, they wanted us to kind of come up with the solution instead of them telling us. So and that really helped. The culture there helped with that. But if you're in a culture where they don't support that, then it's, then you would know that maybe it's when it comes time to make a change, if you were to move, then that's something to look out for. So it was just really helpful to know that I could be empowered and come up with use it to make it work for me, and not come from a place of fear that, I better agree to whatever because, I don't want to lose my job. Well, this was not a lose your job situation, but it was definitely an opportunity to make my job work better for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when this opportunity came and they were like, okay, we want to hear from you. Like we want to hear what your input is. Like what had you been doing? You mentioned that like you were kind of on this journey of self-development. Like what had you been doing to support you in that way?
Well, I always believe in the mantra, if you can name it, you can tame it. So like anytime things like come up that I couldn't, that just cause anxiety or stress or too much worry, like spending time like either journaling about it or talking it out, just if you can name it, you can literally tame it, because the biggest part of it is if you just can't understand it and can't quantify it. So once you can really get to the heart of what needs fixed, it may not even be what you thought it was. And it could actually be so much simpler than like, oh, I got to quit my job and all. Like, no, it's just really like, if I didn't have to do like these couple of things, or if I could do them less often, that would be so much easier. Like that would give me such a reprieve and let me shine in these things I really do love to do.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. I think so much of the journey of transformation is that awareness, like being aware of the things that trigger us. And I love how you incorporated journaling and kind of using that time to reflect, because I think so often when you are like busy working and you're in, a corporate setting, it's very easy to just like ignore that, like what's bugging you, and maybe um maybe complain about it and talk about it in that way, versus like identifying like what it is that you think the problem is, and talking about it in that way to to potentially find a solution, or to maybe reframe it or look at it differently. Like I love using journaling because I think it helps to like calm the mind a little bit when we're like racing and it's like a situation feels so overwhelming and stressful. And it's like, if you just write it out, it's like, oh, okay. Like you feel better just writing it out, and then seeing it on paper. It's like, it allows you to kind of see it from a different perspective. Or like you said, even talking it out with someone that you trust, that, can maybe help look at it from a different perspective, because that's really what I think part of the purpose of journaling is to get it out of our system, like just get it literally out, and then to see if there's any shifts we can make, any perspective changes that we can make, now that we're kind of out of that like stressful, overwhelmed state. Um, so that's so powerful. I love that you were doing that. And I love how you said, if you can name it, you can tame it, because that's really, what you're doing, that exercise is doing. And so how have you been able to use that tool, um, specifically in your life?
The journaling,
Yeah.
like I um, had tied into doing the journaling and then also doing the artist's way. That's another like journaling heavy uh, program. You can do it through a book, but just anything to like get your words out. And then, or if you, I also like to sometimes use prompts. If you just get stuck or like not sure what to say, uh, that can lead to some surprising answers. Like if it just was like a rapid fire like answer, and then maybe you like reflect on your initial gut response on something. That's kind of fun to play with too, to like listen to what your inner being is saying when it's like that word or that blurt just comes out, like, oh, I didn't think that's what I was really feeling about that. um, that's another fun way that I like to do journaling, if I'm not doing like just stream of consciousness, kind of like word vomiting, to,
Yeah.
to clear it all out.
So how does that work? Like when you do the stream of conscious journaling, like what does that look like? Because, for some people that are listening, they may be new to journaling, they may not journal at all, or maybe they, love to journal and want to hear like kind of different ways that they can use journaling to help kind of shift their perspective, or manage the overwhelm as you have been able to do.
Yeah, stream of consciousness journaling is not how I started journaling. Like when I was in high school or college, like it was more like diary entries. So it was very like, exactly what happened in the day. Like, I mean, I could tell you exactly who I worked with and what I was wearing and, like who looked at me funny. Like you, that wasn't like really productive because it wasn't tapping into the feelings of it. So stream of consciousness journaling is more just like, just writing, like just whatever flows out, even if it's like, well, I'm sitting on the floor in my closet, I see a cobweb in the corner, like I'm like, oh, that's my favorite sweater. When's the last time I wore my favorite sweater? Like just kind of seeing where it goes, and you kind of like loosen up that your mind, and like, oh, you're just having a conversation with yourself of like letting it the tap open, and then you just keep going. And then somehow you'll ease into something that's really bothering you or something on your mind without even really knowing it. Like that's just kind of uncorking that initial start, and just starting with a few sentences like, well, how was today? What was your favorite part? Or even a moment of gratitude, like whatever can get you going, and then just keep writing. And with the Artist's Way, Julia Cameron has the morning pages. And so it's 3 pages of stream of consciousness. So inevitably in 3 pages, I don't have that much like to say. That's, like great writing, but somewhere in there is the meat of it. And it's just getting in there, and, the things will come up, and it gives you time to process and work through them. And maybe you don't come to a resolution, but you've like untangled that hairball a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So when you do the journaling, this and the stream of conscious journaling, and you like get it all out there on paper, like what how do you then use that to like where does the shift sort of take place? Is it just like getting it on paper, or in your personal experience, like where do you see that shift kind of happening for you?
It's like you're so busy like writing, and your brain's like kind of focused, and then like you kind of come up for air, and you're like, oh, I feel so much lighter.
Yeah.
Like it's not just like this, I call it a hairball. Like, it's not your junk drawer of your mind. Like you've maybe like put a couple of things here and a couple of things here, and then you're kind of left with just really what's left that's easier to manage. Or you just have more breathing room, that maybe over the next couple days, like a thought can actually flip through your mind of like, oh, that's how I could solve that, or that's a new perspective. Like you just have more space in your head. So because even if your journaling is just writing out the stresses of your day, you've named it, and maybe then you can start looking for solutions. Or if you're like rehashing an argument or something you had, like you're still processing, and it just allows a lot more room in your head. And it's a non-judgmental space. Like learning to be a lot more gentle on yourself is really helpful. And not having judgment when you write it down. Like you can write the snarky thing, you can say the unsayable thing that you wish you said, or like just to like get it out, like get that energy out of you, and then you can process it and be in a better place. So that I have definitely used that on occasion of like just needing to own up on like, well, that's a big jealous feeling I need to like acknowledge. But if you can do it with yourself and just on the page, it is really helpful.
Yeah. And how I love how you said, to do it in a way that's non-judgmental, because I think, the point of these exercises is not to then be like, oh, well, you know, look at me, like here I am, in this web of a thought. And it's not to judge ourselves or to make ourselves feel bad, but to really just be kind of neutral about it and just like observe
Yes.
the thought and observe the behavior versus like identifying with it and judging ourselves for it. So I love that perspective. And how do you like bring that non-judgmental part of the exercise, like how, because I think a lot of people do struggle with that, with judging themselves, or um feeling bad about themselves when they think about certain things, or maybe they're second guessing themselves. I hear this from a lot of clients. Like at the end of the day, they'll kind of like run through conversations that they had during the day with like their boss or with a coworker or with a client. And it's like they're second guessing what they said. And they're like, oh, should I have said that? Should I have said something different? So how do you think, those listeners can bring that, or how have you brought that non-judgmental part to it? Because I think it'll really benefit the listeners who are struggling with that, like kind of staying up at night,
Yeah, you have to
replaying situations.
like let it go. Like I have young kids in the house who love Frozen. So it's like, you gotta let it go. The person that you're like ruminating over that conversation with probably is not giving it a second thought. So give yourself permission to also like release it. If you thought you really could have said something better, then use it as like a learning experience of like, I handled that poorly. How can I do better? Like, is there some sort of action you need to take? Like, can you go revisit it with that person? Say like, I said something unkind yesterday. Like, I really apologize. I was, feeling whatever about it. So, I wasn't my best self. Or is it a sign of some self-work that you need to do? Like, did you say something because like maybe out of jealousy or hurt? Like, can you reflect on that in yourself too? So I think it's important to do some self-reflection, but don't ruminate on something so that it's not productive in any way. It's better just to like blurt it out. Don't censor yourself on the page. Like,
Yes.
and then you can use it as a space to like practice saying it better. Like maybe rewrite the conversation of how you wish it had gone, and aim to do better the next time.
I love that. I love how it's like an opportunity to say it better, like to rehab the conversation. What about in situations where maybe you didn't say what was really on your mind? Can you use this journaling exercise, or have you been able to use it in that way? Because I think what you said is so helpful about using it when maybe you said something that you didn't mean, or that didn't come out the right way, and to like kind of practice saying it better and like kind of reframe the situation. But what about for those who are finding themselves holding back like what they want to say, maybe because they are feeling like that overwhelmed feeling? And so instead of say, like, some people it's like fight or flight, some people go into like freeze mode and they just don't say anything, they don't say what's on their mind, and they don't express themselves. And I don't know if you have been in that situation, and how you've been able to use these techniques, or another technique to help you to use your voice like you did at the beginning of this discussion, where you said what you wanted and you expressed yourself. Have there been times where you've struggled with that, and how were you able to kind of overcome that?
Yeah, we've all said things or not said things that should have been said in the moment. So one is just building up the trust with yourself that your voice matters. So you do need to share it and to get your opinion out there. And it's on the receiver on how they receive it. But you can practice in your journal, like go back and say, this is what I should have said. And then that like rewires that conversation in your head and can leave it more on a positive note. And then also learn, if you like know more about yourself, that like maybe you're not quick in the situation, or you're too fired up, or it's just not, you're not in a mental place to handle that. Like learn to say, that's a good question, I need to think about it, can I get back with you? Like, because they probably don't mind. Like they maybe weren't expecting an answer right away. And if it was an aggressive kind of conversation, then maybe it did need to be diffused and to step away so you don't say something you shouldn't. So I think it's just important to really know yourself and to start standing up for yourself. And the more confidence you can build, the more you'll show up as your true self in life. And if that starts out in the privacy of your journal, then that's great. It's a good practice ground to keep going.
Yeah, I love that. It's like know yourself and then like practicing that. Like if you see yourself coming into certain situations, like again and again, like situations where you feel overwhelmed and you can't have a response right away, and you know that about yourself, then instead of like just trying to come up with something and then not really saying anything at all, like have that line ready. Like, can I think about your question and I'll respond to you, later today or tomorrow, and just like have that kind of response ready to go so that when that situation does come up, you're not unprepared for it because you've planned for it and like you expect it, that it can come up. And then it's almost like by retraining yourself to have that response ready and then thinking about the response, it's like I'm sure over time then you could get to the point where you have the response and you don't need that time to wait because you've like rehearsed it so many times and practiced, and it's like a
Yeah.
muscle, right? Like
Yeah. And maybe it takes a moment of bravery to actually like say it. Like I'm an Enneagram 9. So like that's the peacemaker
mhm.
personality. So like I hate conflict. I avoid it. But through knowing myself better and knowing that that's a trait about me and maybe why that is me, I've learned that I can use that as an asset. So I'm good at mediating things. So I just have to like work on advocating for myself. And with practice, I'm learning too that like the world doesn't end when I speak my mind. Like it actually helps to diffuse a situation. Like we get to a resolution because I've shared what I really meant and what I really think versus just maybe agreeing with some or only sharing half of the story. So that's been huge for growth too. Just like having the uncomfortable conversations and you move through it versus letting it be a roadblock for you. So if you can practice, and like I did not get this way overnight, but it's just the more you can know yourself and trust that like I will be okay. I will be okay. Like my needs are worthy. They need to be shared. Then you can start advocating for yourself. And that it's a great way to start is in your journal.
Yeah. So how did you start to like develop that trust and that belief that your voice matters? Because it's so true. And maybe there's some listeners who struggle with that. Like maybe they that like that there's a struggle of like, does my voice matter? Not feeling like it matters, wanting to avoid conflict. I mean, I think avoiding conflict, so many of us um, have that trait. And I'm not saying that we should like go out and, and try to have conflicts with people, but sometimes it is, it's important to say what's on your mind. And and sometimes that involves there being a disagreement or a conflict. And so how are you able to build that trust in yourself and come to that belief and realization that your voice matters?
The more that I just knew myself, like all the things about myself, then I could feel more whole in myself. And then that like gives you more confidence because if you're truly acting aligned with who you are, then you can be a lot more confident. Like you don't keep saying that, oh, sure, I love green beans when you hate green beans. So like if you're showing up as a person, like who you truly are in all ways, then that confidence just keeps growing. And so it does start with like those inconsequential type things, like don't be agreeable to everything. Like start with like saying, like stopping to think, like, do I really want that? Like when people just, like, oh, do you want coffee? Like I know I don't drink coffee. So that is always a no for me. But like just like how can you know and trust in those things and just like use those as really tiny building blocks, and then you just have a much more stable base because like all those things that make you tick, all the things that truly light you up, and you can invite more of those into your life. So then you're just like a happier person because more of your boxes are getting checked because you're doing more of what you like. Then eventually, like, you do just get more confident because you're more whole, because more pieces of you are showing up.
Yeah, I love that. That is so beautiful. Like um, just really going on this journey of like self-discovery of what it is that you desire, what it is that you like, and then not being afraid to say what that is. I'm reading a book right now by Wayne Dyer. And he was talking about how, people treat us the way that we allow ourselves to be treated. And I think it's tied into this very concept that we're talking about, that, if we don't say like, oh, I don't like coffee, or no, like, I don't want to actually, do that, or I do want to do this, like, I love this. If then people are going to treat us that way. Like, so if we say yes to things that we don't want to do, then they're going to expect us to do things whether we want to do it or not, versus if we, create that boundary and say like, no, actually, like, I'm not going to say yes to that, or I can't say yes to that. Then they're not going to continue to ask us to do things that don't align with who we are, and what, who we truly are, and what's in alignment with um, what we want out of life. And I love that, how you've been able to cultivate that, by just really knowing who you are, and not being afraid um, to respond to situations and requests based on who you are.
Yeah, I'm not perfect yet, but I have more awareness.
Yes,
And
yes.
that definitely came after like basically losing myself in motherhood, because it's such a beautiful thing to have kids that you're raising, and that you do like lose a little bit of yourself because you're taking on this new identity, but you kind of like leave all those other parts of you behind. So once my kids were like 1 and 3, that's when I started to wake up to like, oh, where did Stephanie go? Like the,
Mhm.
the me, because I had spent so much time in baby stuff and I loved it. Like it's what I needed to do, but it was time to like come back to myself. And so that, and it was, when you want to start being a good role model for your kids and you're trying to teach them their interests and seeing what they love to do, like started realizing like, well, what do I love to do? Like, and I have said that it, yeah, I'm not just raising my kids are finishing raising me, because they
I
bring
love
out like
that.
all your insecurities and all the things that you're carrying with you, and all they challenge all your beliefs and with all the why questions, they test all your knowledge. So I think that was like the big impetus, like that motherhood can be like this greatest gift of learning, but you have to be open to it and be willing to change. Like I am not the same person I was, and that's amazing. So just like you don't want your kids to stay kids, like you want them to keep changing and growing. So they've been an inspiration to me in that way.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I am a firm believer that our kids are some of our biggest teachers in life, and they have helped me also in my path to change, and really why I started to change myself in the first place. Like, it all started with my second child, with my son. Right after he was born, my daughter was just over a year, and so they're 17 months apart. And yeah, when my son came into the picture, I was like, okay, for me, the transformation started with like, what kind of mom do I want to be? What kind of person do I want to be? I didn't necessarily lose myself. I was just so like overwhelmed with everything that I didn't even know how to proceed. I was just like in such a state of like overwhelm and just like really burned out. And I didn't even realize it until it was like, okay, I don't I don't want to be this kind of person anymore. And I love it how our children can be that catalyst for change. And, before we kind of wrap things up, I would love to hear about like, what were some of the first things that you did? So you said, you had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and you were like, who is like Stephanie? What is it that, you desire and you want? And so how did that kind of journey for you like begin? What were some of the first things you did? Because I'm sure there are listeners out there who are feeling that way as well, like, who am I? And now that I'm a mother and I've kind of lost myself, like, how did that journey for you, what were some of the first steps that you started to do to kind of find yourself again? And
Well, it started like as I started to get a little bit more sleep, then you could put like more than two thoughts together. So yeah, it was like right around the 1 and 3 year mark. Like, and then you just start with the feeling of like, something's gotta change. Like that kind of
yes.
knowing that you're ready to start looking, and then opportunities start crossing your path. So I signed up for like a writing group, and then I did the Artist's Way, and I listened to a couple of podcasts. Like I just started adding more things to my life to help me be a little bit more curious on that personal growth realm. And then I started making lists of like who I am, things I like, things I would love to do, things I want to do again, ways I want to feel, places I want to go, like just lists and lists and lists. Because it was a way to help like kind of quantify, because sometimes it's not like it's not big things always. It's like it's the really small things. Like that's the everyday magic of like who you are, is like this unique mix of these very tiny things that makes you a completely unique person. So I felt I could have a little bit more control if I could name those things, naming to taming, and
Yes.
then planning some time to do some of those things. Like they didn't have to be long, but it's like, oh, like I really love my tea, brewed a certain way, or as a treat, I like to put cream and honey in it, or I really love like with the way the sun's on my face, like I can go stand outside for 5 minutes and feel that way every day. Like just adding those little bits more into my life of things that I truly love, then that really helped. And then it would just inspire more things, like next steps to take.
I love that. It's like starting small. It seems like, that really is a theme of transformation, is not putting all this pressure on yourself to like make this radical transformation and become a new person. It's like it starts really small, like how you brew your tea and putting honey and milk in it, or like getting 5 minutes of sunshine. And all of those things adding up to create our everyday experience, and making that everyday experience more beautiful in ways that we love. I absolutely love that. And I think that's so helpful for the listeners who maybe feel like all this pressure, like I've got to change everything and it's got to be this massive shift. And it's like, no, actually those little changes. And I'm like trying to remember if it's you or someone else on Instagram who writes about hygiene. Is it someone else or is it
I would
you?
say, yeah, the hygge.
Is
That's my theme of the month.
who is that? What it's? I thought it's hygiene.
No,
I'm like pronouncing it wrong.
I was calling it hygge, but it's like hygge. It's a Danish word, so
Yeah,
I totally butchered.
Hygge. Okay, so
Mhm.
I'm Huga. I've been saying it wrong for the last. I actually, when my daughter was born and she's 5 now, I got some books. I was like searching, like, how to be happier, how to find happiness, right? And that book, I love it because it talks about like those little things that can bring that joy and happiness, like, having a beautiful candle, or the fireplace, or like a cozy blanket, just little things. And so like, yeah, I love how you're sharing that's how you started your transformation, is just learning more about yourself and doing those little things that just make you feel better.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to take away from your mom time. Like you can have a kid on your hip and also be looking at the sunshine. You can like sit and drink your tea while you watch your kids play, or like, I mean, life is just full of the small moments. If you would totally burn out if you tried to change everything about your life all at once. And it really wouldn't even be as meaningful, because that's probably not what's really going to make you happy anyway. It is in the small things.
Yes, I love that. Well, before we wrap up, is there anything else, like any final words you would like to share with the listener? I'm just like, I just love our conversation and how it ended with I can't even remember the word now. I want to say hygiene, but it's
Huga.
Huga.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I was so wrong.
I just want to say, for like moms out there, like, you have the power to change what you want, and you don't have to use the sometimes the perception of like you're a mom to to as like a hindrance, because I was able to like add more things to my plate that I loved, and I didn't even have to pull the mom card of like, well, I can't do these other expectations because I have kids. I was able to share what I loved and get more of what I loved, instead of focusing on the downside of what I can't do to meet the goals. So even if you're not looking for a career change or anything with your job, you can still just focus on the good and keep adding in the good, and the less desirable stuff just kind of falls off, because you realize it's really maybe not that important.
I love that. It's like so much of what we've talked about today, like writing things down and being intentional and really focusing on what it is that you desire and you want to call in. It's like so much of, you know, the principles of manifesting without calling it manifesting, right? Because we're being intentional. And it's like when you focus on what it is that you want to see more of and what you love, you're just going to attract more of that into your life. So beautiful. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for sharing your journey with us. And I loved chatting with you, and you have so many beautiful nuggets that you shared with us today. Can you share with the listeners, where they can find you if they want to kind of hear more about what you have to share?
I'm at fireflyscout.com, and I'm on Instagram at Fireflyscout. And I love to share tips and tricks that help you with your mindset and just find everyday magic.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. It was so nice to chat with you, and we'll stay in touch.
Sounds great.